A British mother. That's all to be heard about Nazanin Zaghari in British media. Her cruel arrest, bad conditions in confinement, and Iran wanting ransom from the UK are among other allegations. But why the fuss over one British subject?
Hi, I'm Leila Faramarzi. In today's Iran Today, let's take a look at a case that's caused contention between Iran and England for over a year now. Iran says its national security has been breached, while England says the arrested is just the British mother.
On April 3, 2016, Nazanin Zaghari came to Iran for a family visit and was arrested in Imam Khomeini International Airport. She is an Iranian but also has British nationality as she married an Englishman, Richard Ratcliffe. She was accused of breaching Iranian national security.
Nazanin has been to Iran 4 times since the baby was born. Every time she's been fine with no problems. She's been over here for 7 years. We met in 2007. She works for a charity that has no connections with Iran and does no work in Iran. So it's not at all clear what the problem is and why she would suddenly be taken. And then also be put in solitary confinement for 36 days now.
The UK started out by giving news of maltreatment towards her without evidence and highlighted her being a mother. Its media was flooded with news of her being a regular woman back to reunite with her family and have her baby girl see her grandparents. No one questioned what else the 39-year-old might have done to be arrested. And if they did, the answer was one thing only.
It's interesting that you say that the Iranians have made some comment about a possible risk to national security. Is there anything that would let you believe that your wife's job, her charitable function within Thomson Reuters Foundation, is there anything that would let you think that perhaps she veered off course and perhaps was doing something outside of the remit of her job?
No. So she works in Morocco and Burma and sub-Saharan Africa. I can't see how that in any way is a national security risk for the state of Iran. And in all honesty, I mean, you know, she went there with her baby to see her granny. I mean, it's just nonsense.
Richard Ratcliffe told of bad conditions in her solitary cell in Kerman prison. This was while, according to a notice by Kerman's Sarallah IRGC Corps, she was kept in a prison suite. The notice says she is in touch with her family, who regularly get to visit her. This is while shortly after, Richard thanked Iran for allowing Nazanin to see her child.
Her husband insisted via several media outlets that she was just a collaborator of Thomson Reuters Charity Foundation in coordinating charity projects. Now that wouldn't have worked in her favor, given Iran's claim to evidence to the contrary.
The Charity Foundation calls itself the philanthropic arm of Thomson Reuters, the world's biggest news and information provider. But all of a sudden, Boris Johnson made an interesting move in Britain's House of Commons at the start of November.
When you look at what Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe was doing, it's just, you know, she was simply teaching people journalism, as I understand it.
That was the British Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, who was soon forced to apologize. This was while Iran had repeatedly said that Ms. Zaghari had secretly been teaching journalism.
And I acknowledge that the words I used were open to being misinterpreted, and I apologize. I apologize to Mrs. Zaghari Ratcliffe and her family if I have inadvertently caused them any further anguish.
Iran's information apparatus was studying the Zaghari case before her arrest. She was simply an English teacher in Iran, soon to start on journalism. Later, she got a scholarship for communications management in England's Metropolitan University. During a Middle East conference at SOAS, she got to know her husband Richard, a Middle East researcher who has traveled to Israel several times. A security organization in Iran has given press TV documents contrary to claims that she is just a mother doing charity work. The said evidence indicates she played a pivotal role in recruiting for BBC Persian service, targeting youngsters dissatisfied with the Iranian ruling body. She has also participated in other projects for British and US government-affiliated companies and institutes to recruit and rank people. Her work with the BBC continued with a project called the Zigzag Academy in a center core role.
مدیر سرویس جهانی BBC گفته که خانم زاغری هرگز برای BBC فارسی کار نکرده.
The BBC refrained from announcing her as an employee, but her BBC payslip can be witnessed. And BBC Media Action, her former employer, formerly known as the World Service Trust, went as far as implying she did work for them, but not in the capacity of journalism trainer. She had administrative duties such as travel bookings, typing and filing, they said. Their statement read that BBC World Trust did deliver an online journalism development project aimed at young people in Iran, which ended in 2012 and was no secret from the Iranian Interior Ministry.
Please bear in mind that the British government itself is divided over relations with Iran. There are some elements in the government, particularly in the Foreign Office, which do want to work for better relations with Iran. But there is another party within the government, often linked to Israel, friends of Israel, who are working hard to undermine the other side and who are trying to exploit issues which arise.
Iran's young population, thirsty for new technology, is fertile ground for picking recruits for foreign media service. Today, about 42 million of Iran's population of approximately 80 million use internet. Via a complex project, webloggers and journalists have been offered courses to be paid for by the Zigzag Academy. The package offers free transport back and forth, as well as hotel stay and food. Published documents show interesting tactics included in the journalist training program by the Zigzag Academy. For instance, using fake names and email IDs, information encryption software and coding software to conceal information. Zaghari planned, designed and implemented educational courses. Graduates were grouped into three. The first group were to go directly to the BBC. The second to companies and institutes working against Iran's administration. And the third were to return to Iran for use when the time's right. It's not clear why a group of simple journalists would need such security training when BBC Farsi or Persian had not even begun activity in Iran to have experienced any pressure. Nazanin's case has caused confusion.
یک بچه داخلی داره که کسانی که ایشونو دستگیر کردن که یکی از نهادهای امنیتی.
The point is that Nazanin Zaghari was arrested by one of the security agencies of Iran, to which espionage has its own definition. I mean that when it comes to spy activities, they are more sensitive than other security agencies even in the world, which I think, with regard to the extent of the damage Iran has suffered from espionage activities, they have the right to behave like that. Any suspicious communications or calls may be taken as an act of espionage. I may add that their criteria for spy activities may vary with other agencies. On the other hand, since Zaghari has a British citizenship after all, and her daughter, being 3 years old, has been banned from leaving Iran, the UK's mainstream media is fixating on the emotional aspects of the case in a bid to divert attention away from the real issue, which is spying.
The BBC got an answer to its years-long efforts before Iran's elections. BBC Farsi was set up months before the elections. That channel was so effective in the 2009 unrest in Iran that observers have named it the flag bearer of anti-Iranian administration media. Mansouri, a contemporary historian, doesn't think it's a big deal if Ms. Zaghari was used as an agent, as this sort of practice is commonplace.
Nazanin Zaghari is not the first journalist they have used as a means of spying, and she will not be the last. I'm not sure, but I guess a heavy sentence awaits her, as she, because of the nature of her job, had access to valuable information. But what I'm trying to say is that abusing the professional journalism as a cover for espionage activities is only one of the numerous conduits of the UK to facilitate infiltration. Now they are trying their best to get her back as soon as possible before she divulges information that she shouldn't, just like the case with Hossein Rassam during the 2009 protests in Iran.
To alternate between the pros and cons of journalism and the journalist,
the misuse of journalism as an arm of intelligence system was pioneered for the first time by the UK government. In fact, the rest of the world has learned this method of spying from the UK. No wonder if they are the founder of most of the predominant news agencies worldwide. In fact, the primary responsibility of these news agencies is to accumulate information and news, not to distribute them. As a result, you see that countries in the world are sort of suspicious of the British-founded new agencies and individuals affiliated to them.
The thing is, Iran is convinced Nazanin Zaghari's activity was not limited to the BBC. A little later in 2010, she joined a British institute called Training Station. This institute receives its budget from organizations affiliated to British and US governments and acts as a means to its founders for regime change and soft war in other countries.
They had trained correspondents and editors-in-chief in different countries before, and now for the Iran project they selected Zaghari. In this institute, 2 projects by the names Iran 1 and Iran 2 were apparently jump-started by Zaghari. Some suspicious titles and said lessons were media tools for change, understood as regime change, investigative journalism including modern spying techniques, otherwise journalism does naturally include investigation, and information security and securing communication. In these courses, how to launch and manage anti-establishment campaigns has been taught, and how to absorb and recruit members for such campaigns and promote them via social media has also been a topic. In a document given to us as an email by Zaghari to her colleagues in Training Station. In it, she says she will be using an alias and tells them not to use her former email address as it's too hard to hide so many things at the same time. It's hard to tell why this British mother had such need for secrecy. We asked the senior media man how ethical it could be to use journalists in espionage projects.
I think if journalists are being used, as you say, or being used as a device to undermine another country or to deliver what you call fake news these days about another country, I think it's completely irresponsible. I think it disrespects the profession of journalism. I think it disrespects journalists themselves, and I think it is entirely inappropriate and entirely wrong for any journalist to behave in that sort of political way. And I would expect and I would hope that the journalistic profession, if they found out people were behaving in that way, they would be thrown out of the profession and no longer be able to call themselves journalists. It's totally irresponsible.
Some lesson goals in the said institute's investigative journalism course were how to join the organization you want to leak information on, how not to ask too many questions to arouse unnecessary suspicion, what to do if someone asks whether you're a journalist, how to rescue yourself if your cover is blown. Such questions, designed for the training of correspondents meant to produce news for the UK, have been suspected as guidelines for a course in espionage rather than journalism. USAID is known as a major pioneer of anti-Iran projects in the US and UK. This institute receives nearly 1% of the total US federal budget. One of its activities is allocating budget to plans made to overthrow certain governments. These are some of the institutes created by that organization's budget. The British mother this story covers has received $360 a day for working with Training Station, which is known to have been funded by US aid. In that institute, Zaghari resorted to using her contacts and defined a project called Women to Women in Business in Iran. But this time the project founder was directly the British Foreign Office. In a document, there is a proposal inked by Zaghari and Kevin Burden, chief of Training Station. The project cost is estimated at £115,000 and is to be implemented between 2016 and 2018. This proposal is a clear sign that the British mother is also partner to a contract with the British Foreign Office.
در میان هر قوم و ملتی
I can safely assume that the UK government will unquestionably do everything in its power to have infiltrators or informers in every country and every ethnic group, either directly or indirectly. I mean, the policy of divide and rule or conquer requires that you have agents or infiltrators who take orders from the UK to sow divisions surreptitiously. That's why when you follow the evidence in ethnic conflicts and skirmishes between Shia and Sunnis, Turks and Persians, Persians and Arabs, you will clearly see the footprint of the UK government.
The project goal is to help Iranian women gain greater economic and social power. But why is the British Foreign Office now worried about jobs for Iranian women? As one reads on, he notices that given the project proposers know of the possible dangers, the plan is fishy. Iran believes the plan is meant to mobilize women into dormant movements to be used in time of need, as determined by Britain's Foreign Office.
توجیه بهتری برای
Espionage activities through the channel of journalism could yield a lot, and the reason is that journalists enjoy a convincing justification for being present at every significant center in the country, have access to every classified information and communicate it to the spying country.
Given points in the program, the same women's empowerment program, which are just a fragment of the evidence, Nazanin Zaghari has been sentenced to 5 years detention as a key player in absorbing Iranians for anti-Iranian establishment soft war projects. Iranians generally see her husband as her recruiter and the actual offender, and they wonder why Britain would have a simple mother venture into Iran for recruitment or facilitating recruitment. Now, we did mention she is accused of involvement in recruiting Iran's dissatisfied youth. But these are times when even many anti-establishment Iranians have feelings of solidarity with a government that is facing foreign military threats. Another point of coincidence comes to mind, that this British media storm has struck when the UK appears to have agreed to the deal almost 4 decades after Iran's complaint that chieftain tanks it had ordered were not delivered.
اولین بار توسط آقای رادکلیف مطرح شد همسر خانم زاغری که
Zaghari's husband, Radcliffe, claims that the Iranian government has captured his wife with the aim of getting its money back from the UK. This claim is fundamentally baseless because the UK's debt to Iran over the chieftain tanks deal is a 35-year-old dispute which was investigated and settled in the British courts during the term of Iran's previous president. The payment of the debt was dragged on until today because the transition of money was almost impossible during the sanctions. As a result, drawing a link between these two is absolutely baseless.
Some British media outlets linked the case to the money the UK was to pay Iran instead of the tanks, meaning Iran would free Ms. Zaghari in return for a ransom. But soon after these allegations, the British Foreign Office announced there was no connection between freeing the accused and a call for money. In fact, many thinking Iranians say blowing up the Zaghari-Ratcliffe case when the £450 million UK payment is due anyway would be to Iran's disadvantage, if anything, because it would be setting a condition on money that is to be paid to Iran anyway.
No, the two issues are clearly not linked at all, and they're only being linked by the enemies of good relations between Iran and Britain. Before the latest publicity about this case, Britain was on course to sign an agreement in Tehran on the occasion of Boris Johnson's visit, and virtually all the details on this long-standing issue had been settled. But then the parties that we have just been discussing, who want to poison relations, they started to capitalize on this issue and have tried to link the two. Because they want the problems to continue.
Part of these concerns, such as infiltration and security challenges, are understandable and should be taken seriously. But I think that some parts of these concerns have got something to do with the efforts to undermine the current administration's achievements. We should admit that during the current administration, Iran's status in the international community is enhancing, but some specific groups don't want the enhancement of Iran's relations with foreign countries for any reason or whatsoever. Israel and many Arab countries don't want that.
Britain, a once colonial power, has a long history of interfering with and influencing Iran's ruling body and society. Although Iran was never a British colony, Iran and Britain have had relations for 200 years, part of which saw Iran victimized as a barrier between the Russian Empire and India. Using the media as a tool of propaganda is also a long-standing practice. An example is when Radio BBC gave the signal to set in motion Operation Ajax to overthrow the Mossadegh administration via what's known as a coup of 1953.
There is something that the world's intelligence agencies usually have a problem with, and that is the analysis of data. I mean, they accumulate a plethora of information and details, but unfortunately they mostly fail to analyze and make the right decisions. In this field, the UK government is usually successful and makes fewer mistakes, which owes it to the good cooperation and close relations among its research centers, police and intelligence agencies.
It's true that Britain boasts of what it called its soft power, which includes foundations and institutions supported by the British government, which have the professed aim of, quote, encouraging democracy, unquote, around the world. And under this banner, the British government supports regime change. And I'm afraid some of these efforts have been directed at countries in the Middle East, including Syria and Iran.
A lot of the training which Zaghari was to oversee included apparently very valid lessons, but they came across as suspicious given they included coding and encrypted communication skills. Journalistic honesty all too easily comes under question when its borders with espionage are blurred.
That's all for now. Thanks for staying with us, and do watch again next week at the same time. And take a look at the social pages. Perhaps you'd like to let us know what else you'd like to know about Iran. Bye for now.